So I'm kind of figuring this out. Like I said, these videos, me talking about different topics, some related to my acting, some related to directing, and some related just to film production, and some editing also too. But mainly, a lot of times I come up with these ideas. I think that I'm reaching out to people who are entertainment related fields. I just finished an audition. So I decided, okay, let me throw this together, because sometimes on auditions, a lot of them are self-tapes nowadays. Mostly all of them are self-tapes. Sometimes they'll call you back in for a chemistry read, what's called a chemistry read, or they might call you in for a callback in person. But what I wanted to talk about today was this question. And I want to try to relate this to everyone. People going on job interviews. It doesn't even have to be related to anything in the entertainment business, because this is a question that a lot of recruiters, a lot of supervisors who are interviewing someone for a job ask you, tell me about yourself. Now, a lot of people get freaked out by that question because they don't know where to start. They don't know what the interviewer or the job supervisor wants to hear. A lot of times you think they want just to hear information that's related to the job. But sometimes most of the time, they just want to hear you talk about yourself, to see if you're confident enough to talk about yourself, to tell them something that's interesting about yourself. Maybe a little bit about your background, where you went to school. I have my favorite story. I'm going to give you the brief version. When anyone asks me to tell them about myself, it's my favorite story, and I've been using it for years because it happened to me when I graduated from high school. I lived in a small town in New Jersey called Union. And when I graduated high school, first thing I wanted to do was just to get a job. I wasn't interested in going to college. I was done with school. So I went to a small security agency that had been around for a long time in Union, and it's called Pinkerton Security. And I went there just to get a position as a security officer. So I filled out the application, and a few minutes later, I turned it in. And then about maybe 10 minutes later, a gentleman about my age that I am now came out from the back, and he said, let me speak to you, James Tucker. Can you come to my office? So I went in his office, and he said, I see you're here for a security officer, but have you ever considered working as a private investigator? And I said, no, I hadn't considered that because I don't have any experience as a private investigator. He said, oh, don't worry about that. We have a videotape series that we use to train new investigators. So I told him, definitely, I'm interested. So the next day I came back and I started this long VHS training program, long and boring. But it really did give me information about the basics, the bare bone basics of being a private investigator. So it was about a week program, question and answers, some interviews, stuff like that. They wanted to see how much knowledge I retained from the video series. So about a week later, after the training, I was out on my first case. It was a marital investigation case, and it was based in Newark, New Jersey. Now, even that time, that was the early 80s, 1981. Newark has always been a dangerous place, and I guess it is still today. I haven't visited Newark in years, but I'm confident that it's still a dangerous place. Me being young and having no experience in this field, didn't even think about that. So I went, met the client, and the client was a young woman, probably in her early 30s, and she answered the door. It was an evening meeting where I had a client meeting. It was an evening meeting, and so I met her, and she had a young child in her arm, probably like not even 2 years old. And it was kind of, a kind of depressing, sad first case, because she had an older husband and she had suspected that he was cheating on her. So again, I don't want to give you the whole long version, but I did the interview with her, and she told me what time her husband got off of work and where his address was. She had a picture of him, all that kind of stuff that you see for private investigators will need to recognize someone. So I went and waited outside his employment, which wasn't that far from. He worked at some kind of warehouse, and I wasn't really sure what he did. But about maybe 10 or 15 minutes sitting outside in the parking lot, I saw him exit the building. And one thing that really surprised me when I first saw him, he was handicapped. I wasn't expecting it. No one told me that he was handicapped. He had a really prominent limp. And so he got in his car. I followed him. He went to a bar. I waited outside. I decided to go into the bar, and I was dressed, for this bar, I was dressed very inappropriately. I had on a suit. I looked completely out of place. I'm like 19 years old. I entered this working class bar down in Newark, New Jersey, and everyone in there were regulars. You know, it's a neighborhood bar. And as soon as I walked in, it was like that comedy thing you see in a movie where everyone stops and looks. And I was completely out of place. So I sat down. I went to the bar first and I ordered a beer and I sat down. And he was in the back of the room. I could see him and I could hear him talking with friends and stuff. So I only stayed a few minutes. I just wanted to make sure that, you know, he was the right guy. And I was confident he was. So I went back outside, saw his car, waited. Then became the interesting part. I started following him. Untrained, I was following a little too close. Not comically too close, but a little too close. And ultimately, I'm gonna wrap this up. Ultimately, he spotted me. And he called the police, and I didn't know it. And I'm still following him. And a few minutes later, a police car pulls up. Actually, I'm leaving the part out. I had lost him for a few moments. And I think during that time I had lost him, that's when he called the police. Because these were the days before cell phones. If you want to call the police, you had to go to a payphone. So he lost me long enough for him to make a call without me knowing he had called the police. And the police pulled me over. And they told me that, you asked for my ID. Luckily, I had ID, my driver's license and my investigator license. And the cop looked at me and he said, you know what? You're going to end up getting yourself killed. And that was my first case. But that's the story I like to tell. You might not have a story that is that complicated or that entertaining. I tell this story all the time in all kind of different employment settings. I don't tell that long version, but I have a longer version. I tell the shorter version. But bottom line, what I'm saying is, don't be afraid of the question, tell me about yourself. Don't think that it has to be just about the job that you're trying to get hired for. They want to know about you. And once you have something, even if you're young, even if you're in your 20s, even if you're, you're just starting work and maybe this is your first job, you're 18 years old, or you're older and you have some kind of experience, look into your life, find some kind of interesting story that you can talk confidently about. You don't want to be hemming and hawing and not giving information out freely. And be ready to take questions, because sometimes in the past I've had people ask me questions about that because people find that interesting. Every day you don't run across someone who was a private investigator. And I worked at that job for like 2 years before I decided, you know what, I need to go to college. And ultimately I did go to college, but I kept working in the private security field. So that gave me more stories that I can talk about. Again, the bottom line is don't fear that question. Have that answer ready. And have multiple stories, because you have to read the room. Sometimes when I start to tell this story, it's, everybody perks up, everybody's listening. And sometimes it falls flat. So I shorten it or I pivot. So be prepared to talk about yourself. Don't be afraid to talk about yourself. That helps you build confidence to speak in front of people. I know a lot of people find it difficult to speak in front of crowds, maybe even to speak at an interview. But if you're really serious about moving up in your job world, maybe going for a better job than you have now, you need to have that confidence to talk about yourself. Don't be shy about it, because you want people to know who you are. And again, be your real self. Be the best of your real self. Not the depressed real self or the down and out or, the over the top real self. Just be your real self and be prepared to talk about yourself. And that's it for this one. I'll see you in the next one.